You wake up, check your phone, and before your feet even touch the ground, your money is already leaking. Not in big, dramatic ways, not in some obvious catastrophic mistake, but quietly, silently, consistently. A subscription you forgot, a habit you never questioned, a decision you made on autopilot, and by the end of the month, you don't feel broke because of one big failure. You feel stuck because of 1,000 invisible ones. Now, here's the truth most people never hear. Wealth is not built in noise. It is built in silence. And in this audiobook, you are about to step into a completely different way of thinking, a way that doesn't rely on luck, a way that doesn't demand stress, a way that doesn't require you to become someone else. In this audiobook, Japanese Money Secrets, you will discover 9 powerful habits practiced quietly for generations. Habits that have allowed ordinary people to build extraordinary stability, peace, and wealth without ever needing to show it. You will learn how to think differently about spending, how to design your environment so money flows with intention, how to eliminate financial noise so clarity becomes your default, how to build discipline that doesn't feel like punishment, but feels like control, and most importantly, how to build silent wealth. Because here's the punchline most people miss. Loud money impresses strangers. Silent money protects your future. This is not financial advice. This is educational guidance rooted in behavioral awareness, discipline, and long-term thinking. And if you stay with me until the end, you will not just understand these habits, you will feel them. You will begin to see your own life differently, your decisions differently, your future differently. So take a breath, because chapter 1 begins not with money, but with something far more dangerous, your awareness. Chapter 1. The invisible leak. There is a moment most people never notice. It happens in the smallest decisions, the quietest impulses, the places where no one is watching. That moment is where wealth is either built or broken. You see, most people believe financial problems come from big mistakes, bad investments, job loss, unexpected emergencies. But those are not the real danger. The real danger is something far more subtle, the daily leak. In Japan, there is a cultural awareness that developed over centuries of scarcity, rebuilding, and precision living. People learned something powerful. Not how to earn more, but how to lose less without feeling deprived. And that changes everything, because losing less is easier than earning more. But it requires something most people avoid: honesty. Let me ask you something. Do you know exactly where your money went last month? Not roughly, not generally. Exactly, most people don't. Not because they are careless, but because they are disconnected. Money leaves their life the same way time does, quietly. And here's what's dangerous. When something leaves quietly, it teaches you nothing. You don't feel the loss. You don't question the pattern. You don't correct the behavior. You just continue. That is how someone earning well can still feel trapped. That is how someone working hard can still feel behind, because effort without awareness leaks. Now imagine something different. Imagine every decision had weight. Not emotional weight, not guilt, clarity. Imagine seeing your financial life not as chaos, but as a system, a calm, controlled, intentional system. This is where the first Japanese secret begins, not with restriction, but with observation, because you cannot control what you refuse to see. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people avoid looking closely at their money, for the same reason they avoid looking closely at their habits. because they already know something is off. But here's the shift. In this system, awareness is not punishment. It is power. You are not tracking to judge yourself. You are tracking to understand yourself. There is a difference. One creates guilt, the other creates growth. And once you begin to observe your patterns, something fascinating happens. You stop needing discipline. Because awareness replaces it, you naturally question things. Do I need this? Do I even enjoy this? Why did I buy this? And slowly, quietly, your behavior changes, not because someone told you to, but because you can no longer ignore what you see. That is the beginning of silent wealth. Not earning more, seeing more. And here's a line I want you to remember. You don't fix your finances by forcing control. You fix them by removing blindness. Now take a moment. Think about your last 7 days. Not your income, your decisions. What was automatic? What was intentional? What was invisible? Because in the next chapter, we're going to take this awareness and turn it into something tangible, something simple, something almost old-fashioned, but powerful enough to quietly change your entire financial trajectory. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Good. Stay with it. What if the simplest tool was the one that changed everything? Not an app, not a system, not a complex strategy, just a pen, a page, and the courage to be honest. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Good. Chapter 2, The Kakebo Effect, Turning Awareness into Control. In a world obsessed with automation, Japan chose intention. While most people today rely on apps that track everything automatically, there is a quiet practice that has existed for over a century. A method so simple, most people dismiss it. And that is exactly why it works. It's called Kakebo, a handwritten money journal. But don't let that simplicity fool you, because this is not about writing numbers. This is about changing behavior. You see, when something is automatic, it becomes invisible. Money comes in, money goes out, charts update, notifications appear. But your brain, it disengages. You become a passenger in your own financial life. And passengers don't build wealth, they drift. Kakebo forces you to do something uncomfortable. Pause. Every expense, written by hand. Every decision, acknowledged. Every pattern, exposed. And here's what happens next. Something subtle, but powerful. You slow down, you stop reacting, and start thinking. Because when you write something down, you don't just record it, you experience it. That's why, as highlighted in traditional Japanese financial habits, physically recording expenses creates a level of awareness that passive tracking simply cannot replicate. It's not about discipline, it's about friction. Small, intentional friction, enough to interrupt autopilot. Now let's go deeper. Kakebo is built around 4 simple categories: needs, wants, culture, unexpected. And at first glance, it feels basic. But here's where the shift happens. You start asking better questions. Not, can I afford this? But, why did I buy this? Did this add value? Would I make this decision again? That changes everything. Because most people think budgeting is about restriction. But in this system, it becomes reflection. You are not cutting your life down. You are refining it. You begin to see patterns, the late-night purchases, the emotional spending, the habits tied to stress, boredom, or distraction. And once you see those patterns, they lose their power because unconscious behavior cannot survive conscious observation. Now imagine doing this for 30 days, not perfectly, just consistently. You don't need to change anything at first, just observe, just write, just notice. And then something shifts. You start hesitating before spending, not out of fear, but out of awareness. That pause is where wealth begins, because wealth is not built in big decisions. It's built in pauses, in moments where you could spend, but choose not to. And here's the deeper truth. Most people don't have a money problem. They have an awareness problem. Fix the awareness, and the money follows. Now let me give you a line you can carry with you. Every dollar you write down becomes a decision you control, not track. Control, because now you're no longer guessing. You're no longer reacting. You are directing, and that is the difference between people who feel stuck and people who quietly move forward. Now, if this is resonating with you, take a moment, not later, right now. Make a mental contract with yourself. A simple one. I will start paying attention. That's it. No pressure, no perfection, just awareness. If that commitment feels real to you, that's your first step towards silent wealth. And if you want to go deeper, share one thing you've been spending on without thinking, not for judgment, for clarity. Because once you say it out loud, you take control of it. Now here's where it gets interesting, because awareness alone is not enough. You can see everything clearly and still make the same decisions. So the question becomes, how do you turn awareness into discipline without relying on motivation? Because motivation fades. And in the next chapter, we're stepping into something far more powerful. A concept that built resilience in an entire culture. A mindset that transforms small actions into unstoppable momentum. A philosophy that doesn't demand perfection, but guarantees progress. And once you understand it, you will never look at small steps the same way again. Good. Now we go deeper. Chapter 3. Kaizen, the power of invisible progress. Most people fail financially for one simple reason. They try to change everything all at once. They wake up one day, feel motivated, and decide, I'm going to save more. I'm going to cut expenses. I'm going to fix my life. And for a few days, maybe even a week, they do. Then reality returns. Fatigue sets in, old habits creep back, and slowly everything resets. Not because they are weak, but because they chose intensity over sustainability. Now, here's what Japan understood long before the modern world started chasing productivity hacks. Progress is not built through dramatic change. It is built through small, consistent refinement. This philosophy is called Kaizen, and it is one of the most powerful wealth-building principles you will ever understand. Because Kaizen removes pressure. You are not required to become perfect. You are only required to become slightly better. 1%, that's it. 1% smarter with your money. 1% more aware of your habits. 1% more intentional with your decisions. And that sounds small, but here's what most people underestimate. Small improvements compound, just like interest, just like time, just like discipline. You don't notice them at first, but over weeks, over months, over years, they become everything. Think about this. If you reduce unnecessary spending by just a small amount each day, if you become slightly more mindful with each decision, you are not just saving money, you are changing identity. You are becoming someone who is in control. And identity is what sustains behavior, not motivation, because motivation fades, but identity stays. Now here's where Kaizen becomes dangerous in a good way. It removes your excuses. You can't say, I don't have time. You can't say, it's too hard. You can't say, I'll start later, because later is just a collection of small delays. And Kaizen operates in the present, right now. What is one small improvement you can make today? Not 10, not 5, 1. Maybe it's skipping one unnecessary purchase. Maybe it's writing down your expenses for the first time. Maybe it's choosing to pause before clicking buy. Small, but intentional. And here's the shift most people never make. They underestimate small actions because they overestimate short-term results. They want immediate change, immediate proof, immediate success. But Kaizen doesn't give you that. It gives you something better. It gives you certainty. Because if you improve slightly every day, you cannot stay the same. It becomes mathematically impossible. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Big change feels exciting, but small change is what survives. And survival is what builds wealth. Because wealth is not a moment, it is a pattern. Now imagine this. Two people earn the same income. One makes small, consistent improvements. The other relies on bursts of motivation. Who wins? Not immediately, but inevitably. The one who stayed consistent. The one who stayed quiet. The one who didn't need to prove anything. Just improve something. And this connects to something deeper you've already felt. That quiet work, the kind nobody sees, is where real strength is built, not in announcements, not in plans, not in intentions, but in action, daily, silent, consistent. Now pause for a second. Think about your current financial habits, not what you want them to be, what they are. What is one small improvement you can make today, not tomorrow? Today, because the moment you act, you step into Kaizen. And once you step into it, you don't need motivation anymore. You just need consistency. Now, if this idea is hitting you, if you feel that shift happening, take a second and commit to one small change. And if you want to make it real, say it out loud or write it down. Because clarity becomes stronger when it's expressed. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. Because improving slowly is one thing, but protecting your progress? That's something else entirely. Because what most people don't realize is that even when they start building wealth, they lose it, not through bad luck, but through exposure, through noise, through pressure, through comparison. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover a habit so counterintuitive that most people ignore it completely. A habit that explains why some of the wealthiest individuals look completely ordinary. No signals, no flexing, no noise, just quiet power. And once you understand it, you'll realize something uncomfortable, that showing wealth and building wealth are often opposites. Stay with me, because this is where everything flips. Chapter 4, The Discipline of Invisibility. There is a quiet rule that separates those who look wealthy from those who become wealthy. And most people never notice it, because it doesn't show up on social media. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't get attention. It hides. In Japan, wealth is often invisible. No loud displays, no unnecessary signals, no constant need to prove anything. And this is not accidental, it is intentional. Because when you remove the need to show wealth, you remove the pressure to spend it. Now think about your own environment. How many decisions are influenced not by need, but by perception? Clothes chosen to impress, gadgets bought to signal success, experiences shared more for validation than enjoyment. This is not judgment. This is awareness. Because the moment you start performing wealth, you stop building it. And this is where most people get trapped. They don't spend money to improve their lives. They spend money to maintain an image. And images are expensive. They demand constant updates, constant upgrades, constant attention. But real wealth? It grows in silence. There is no pressure, no urgency, no performance, just steady accumulation. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you need people to see your success, the harder it becomes to actually build it. Because your money is no longer serving your future. It's serving your identity. And identity can become a trap. That's why one of the most powerful habits you can develop is learning to move quietly, to build without announcing, to grow without showing, to improve without explaining. Because when you do that, you protect your energy, you protect your focus, and most importantly, you protect your money. This idea is echoed in a simple but powerful principle. The strongest moves are often the ones nobody sees coming. Let that sit for a moment, because it changes how you think about everything. Now imagine this. You receive extra income. Most people feel an immediate urge. Upgrade something, buy something, show something. But what if you didn't? What if you held it quietly? What if you let it grow instead of displaying it? That is the beginning of control, because the moment you stop reacting to money emotionally, you start directing it intentionally. And that is rare. Now let me give you a line you won't forget. If your lifestyle grows faster than your discipline, your wealth disappears silently. Read that again, because this is where most people lose, not because they don't earn enough, but because every increase in income is matched by an increase in spending, and they call it progress. But it's not progress. It's expansion without foundation. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, what can I afford now? Start asking, what can I keep building quietly? That question changes everything, because now you're thinking long-term. You're thinking strategically. You're thinking like someone who understands that wealth is not about what you show. It's about what you keep. Now take a moment. Be honest with yourself. Where in your life are you spending to be seen, not judged, just observed? Because awareness is still your greatest tool, and once you see it, you can choose differently. Now here's where it gets even deeper, because staying invisible is powerful, but it's not enough. You also need something else, something that protects your decisions before they even happen, something that removes temptation without requiring constant discipline, because discipline alone will eventually fail. But environment shapes behavior automatically. And in the next chapter, you're going to discover a concept so simple, most people overlook it completely, a way to design your life so that good financial decisions become effortless, not forced, not stressful, just natural. And once you understand it, you'll realize that control is not about trying harder. It's about setting things up smarter. Now we step into something subtle, but powerful. Dear viewer, we strive to create high-quality videos for you. Please assist us in improving our efforts by commenting on what you like about the video and what you would change or add. We would be very grateful. Chapter 5. Design your environment, the silent architect of wealth. Most people believe discipline is the answer. They tell themselves, I just need more willpower. I need to try harder. I need to be more consistent. But here's the truth. Most people learn too late. Willpower is unreliable. It fades when you're tired. It disappears when you're stressed. It weakens when life becomes unpredictable. And if your financial life depends on willpower alone, it will eventually collapse. But there is something far more powerful than discipline, something quieter, something almost invisible, your environment, because your environment decides your behavior before you do. Think about it. If temptation is always within reach, you will eventually give in. If spending is always one click away, you will eventually click. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. Now here's what Japanese culture mastered over time. They didn't rely on constant self-control. They designed their surroundings to support control. Simple homes, minimal distractions, intentional spaces, not as a trend, as a system. Because when your environment is clean, your decisions become clear. And when your decisions become clear, your money stays where it belongs. Now imagine this. Your phone. How many apps are designed to make you spend? One tap, one swipe, one impulse, and the transaction is done. No pause, no reflection, no awareness. That's not accidental, that's design. But here's the question most people never ask. If the world is designed to make you spend, why isn't your life designed to help you save? Pause on that. Because that is where power begins. You don't need more discipline. You need fewer triggers. Now, let's make this practical. What if you removed saved payment methods? What if you unsubscribed from marketing emails? What if you created friction between you and impulsive decisions? Suddenly, spending requires effort, and effort creates awareness. That's the shift. You are not restricting yourself. You are protecting yourself. Because the easier something is, the less you think about it. And the less you think, the more you lose control. Now let me give you a line to anchor this idea. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your environment. If your environment encourages spending, you will spend. If your environment supports awareness, you will save. It's that simple. Now, here's where it becomes powerful. You don't need to change everything. Just adjust small things. Move your money to a separate account. Delay purchases by 24 hours. Keep your financial tools visible and your temptations hidden. Small shifts, but they create massive outcomes because behavior follows structure and structure removes chaos. Now take a moment. Look around your life, not emotionally, practically. What in your environment is encouraging bad financial decisions? Is it your phone, your habits, your routine? And more importantly, what can you remove or redesign? Because once you change your environment, you don't need to fight yourself anymore. You align with yourself. Now this connects to something deeper, because simplicity is not just aesthetic, it is strategic. In fact, one of the most overlooked wealth principles is how simple your life is. And here's something powerful to remember. Complexity creates confusion. Confusion creates mistakes. Mistakes cost money. That's why simplifying your financial system is one of the most underrated moves you can make. Not more accounts, not more apps, not more strategies. Less, clearer, focused. because clarity builds control, and control builds wealth. Now here's where we go next, because designing your environment is powerful, but there is something even deeper, something internal, something that determines how you feel about money itself. Because here's the truth. If saving feels like sacrifice, you will eventually stop. But what if saving didn't feel like losing? What if it felt like gaining? What if it felt rewarding? Because in the next chapter, you're about to discover a psychological shift that transforms saving from restriction into satisfaction. And once you feel that shift, you will never struggle with money the same way again. Take a breath, because this next shift is where everything becomes easier. Chapter 6, The Reward of Restraint, Turning Saving into Satisfaction. Most people don't fail at saving money because they lack knowledge. They fail because of how it feels. Saving feels like loss. Spending feels like reward. And as long as that emotional equation stays the same, your behavior will never truly change. You will always be fighting yourself. Now here's what makes this so powerful. In Japanese culture, this emotional equation is reversed. Saving is not seen as restriction. It is seen as refinement. Spending is not automatically rewarding. It is evaluated. That shift changes everything, because now you are not depriving yourself. You are selecting your life more carefully. Let me explain. Imagine two people. One buys something impulsively. Quick excitement, short-term pleasure, then nothing. The other pauses. They decide not to buy. At first, it feels like they lost something, but then something else happens. Clarity. They realize they didn't actually need it. They feel control. They feel intentional. That feeling, that is a deeper reward. But most people never reach it because they never pause long enough to feel it. They jump straight from impulse to action, and they miss the satisfaction of restraint. Now here's the key. Saving is not about denying yourself everything. It's about choosing what actually matters. Because when everything is allowed, nothing feels valuable. But when you become selective, everything gains meaning. This is where mindful spending becomes powerful. Not don't spend, but spend with intention. And here's what happens next. You stop wasting money on things that don't matter, which means you have more for things that do. That's not restriction, that's elevation. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. When you control your spending, you upgrade your standards. Not your lifestyle, your standards. Because now you're not asking, can I buy this? You're asking, does this deserve my money? And that question filters everything. Now here's something deeper. Most people spend to feel better. Stress, boredom, pressure. Spending becomes emotional relief. But that relief is temporary. And it creates a loop. Feel bad to spend, to feel better, to feel worse, later to repeat. That loop destroys wealth. But when you change your relationship with money, you break the loop. You stop using money to manage emotions, and you start using awareness. Now think about this. What if instead of spending when you feel stressed, you paused, not forever, just for a moment? That moment breaks the pattern. And once the pattern breaks, you regain control. Now this connects to something deeper from what you've already learned. Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself. But real discipline is removing the need to force. It's aligning your behavior with your awareness. And that's exactly what happens here. You are not forcing yourself to save. You are choosing not to waste. That's a completely different mindset. Now take a moment. Think about the last thing you bought impulsively, not to judge yourself, just to observe. Did it truly improve your life, or did it just fill a moment? Because that awareness is where your power lives. Now here's the shift. Instead of chasing the feeling of spending, start noticing the feeling of not spending. The calm, the control, the clarity. That is a deeper reward. And once you feel it consistently, you won't need to force anything anymore. Now, if this is resonating with you, make a small commitment, not to stop spending, but to pause before spending, just a pause. Because that pause is where transformation begins. Now, here's where we go next. Because controlling your spending is powerful. But there's another layer, a layer most people completely ignore. Where your money goes after you decide to keep it. Because saving alone is not enough. You can save consistently and still feel stuck. Why? Because you're holding money without giving it direction. And in the next chapter, we're going to unlock something critical, a way to give your money purpose so it stops sitting still and starts working quietly in the background, because silent wealth is not just about keeping money. It's about positioning it. And once you understand this, you'll realize that money should never be idle. It should always be moving, even when you're not. Stay with me, because now we move from control to direction. Chapter 7. Give every dollar a job. The discipline of purpose. Most people think saving money is the goal. It's not. Saving money without purpose creates stagnation. You hold it, you protect it, but eventually you question it. Why am I doing this? What is this for? Should I just use it? And slowly, quietly, you start undoing your own progress. Because money without direction feels meaningless. Now here's what changes everything. In Japanese financial thinking, money is not just stored. It is assigned. Every yen has a role. Every decision has intention, not in a complicated way, in a clear way. Because clarity removes confusion, and confusion is what leads to waste. Now think about your own situation. If someone asked you right now, what is your money doing for you? Would you have a clear answer? Or would it be vague? Saving, just in case. For the future, I guess. Something important, eventually. That vagueness is where discipline begins to fade, because the human mind needs purpose. Without it, it drifts. So here's the shift. Stop thinking of money as something you have. Start thinking of it as something that is assigned. Some of it protects you. Some of it grows for you. Some of it serves your life now. Each role is clear. Each role is intentional. And once you do this, you remove internal conflict. You don't feel guilty spending because that money was meant to be spent. You don't feel tempted to overspend because you know exactly what each portion is for. That's the power of clarity. Now let's break this down simply. You don't need complexity. You need separation of purpose. Money for living, money for growth, money for security. 3 simple roles. But here's where most people go wrong. They mix everything together. One account, one pool, no structure. And when everything is mixed, everything becomes available. And when everything is available, impulse takes over. That's how money disappears. Not through bad decisions, through unclear structure. Now imagine something different. You open your account, and you know exactly what each part is for. There is no confusion, no second guessing, no emotional decision making, just clarity. That clarity is control. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Money without purpose gets spent. Money with purpose gets protected. Simple, but powerful. Because now you are not reacting to money. You are directing it. And this connects directly to something deeper. When your system is simple, your mind becomes clear. And when your mind is clear, your decisions improve. That's why simplicity is not just convenient, it is strategic. As we touched on earlier, simplifying your financial structure eliminates confusion and builds control over time. And control is what creates stability. Now take a moment. Ask yourself honestly, if your money disappeared tomorrow, would you know exactly where it went? Or would it feel scattered? Because scattered money reflects scattered thinking, and focused money reflects intentional living. Now here's where it gets deeper, because giving money a job is powerful, but there's something even more important. Consistency. Because assigning money once doesn't change your life. Repeating that behavior does. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something that sounds simple, but is incredibly difficult in today's world. Consistency without burnout. Consistency without pressure. Consistency without needing motivation. Because most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they don't sustain it. And once you understand this next principle, you'll realize something powerful. Wealth is not built by intensity, it is built by rhythm. Now we step into the rhythm, the quiet force most people underestimate. Mate, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 8, The Rhythm of Consistency. Why slow always wins. Most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they cannot sustain what they start. They begin strong, focused, motivated, but then life happens. Fatigue, distraction, unexpected problems, and slowly the system breaks, not because it was wrong, but because it was too heavy to carry every day. Now here's the truth that changes everything. Wealth is not built in bursts. It is built in rhythm, a steady, repeatable pattern. That doesn't rely on how you feel, because feelings change, energy fluctuates, but rhythm continues. This is something deeply embedded in Japanese culture, from craftsmanship to daily routines to financial habits. Consistency is not treated as intensity. It is treated as identity. You don't try to be consistent, you become someone who is. And that shift removes pressure completely. Now think about your own habits. How many things have you started and stopped? Not because they didn't work, but because they didn't last. That's the pattern most people live in. Start, stop, restart, repeat. And every time you restart, you lose momentum. But rhythm eliminates that cycle. Because rhythm doesn't require perfection. It requires continuation, even on bad days, even when it's inconvenient, even when you don't feel like it. Now let's connect this to your financial life. Saving once doesn't build wealth. Saving consistently does. Tracking your money once doesn't create awareness. Tracking it regularly does. Making one good decision doesn't change your life. Repeating good decisions does. That's rhythm. And here's where most people go wrong. They aim too high. They try to change everything. They overload themselves, and then they collapse. But rhythm is built differently. It starts small, so small it feels almost insignificant. But it repeats daily, weekly, monthly, and over time it becomes automatic. That's when you stop relying on discipline because your system carries you. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Consistency is not about doing more, it's about missing less. Read that again, because that is the key. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to show up more often than you don't. And that alone separates those who build wealth from those who stay stuck. Now here's something deeper. Most people attach emotion to consistency. They think they need to feel motivated, but motivation is unreliable. What you need is commitment, a quiet decision. I will continue even when it's boring. Because let's be honest, most of what builds your future is not exciting. It's repetitive, it's simple, it's quiet, and that's exactly why most people don't do it. But those who do, they win, not loudly, but inevitably. Now this connects to something you've already felt. Real progress happens in silence, without applause, without recognition, without immediate results. And that's where strength is built quietly, consistently, without needing validation. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what is one financial habit you can repeat consistently, not perfectly, just consistently? Because that one habit, if sustained long enough, will change everything. Now here's where it gets powerful. Because once you build rhythm, you unlock something most people never experience. Momentum. And momentum feels different. It doesn't require force. It carries you forward. And in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that protects that momentum, something that ensures your progress doesn't get interrupted by one of the most dangerous forces in modern life, distraction. Because no matter how strong your system is, if your focus is weak, your progress will break. And once you understand how to protect your focus, you will realize something powerful. Wealth is not just about money, it's about attention. Now, we protect what you've started building. Chapter 9. Guard your attention, the currency behind all wealth. Most people think money is their most valuable resource. It's not. Your attention is. Because where your attention goes, your decisions follow. And where your decisions go, your money follows. So if your attention is scattered, your money will be too. Now look at the world around you. Everything is competing for your focus. Notifications, ads, endless scrolling, constant noise. And here's the dangerous part. Most of it is designed to make you act impulsively. Buy now. Click here. Limited time. Urgency is manufactured because urgency bypasses thinking. And when thinking is bypassed, spending becomes automatic. That's why distraction is not just a productivity problem, it's a financial problem. Because every time your attention is pulled away, you lose control. Now here's what makes this powerful. In Japanese culture, focus is treated with respect, not as a tool, as a discipline. Because focus protects intention, and intention protects your future. Now think about your daily life. How often do you make decisions while distracted? Scrolling and buying, watching and clicking, thinking about something else while spending. That is how money disappears. Not through bad logic, through divided attention. Now imagine something different. You create space. Before spending, you pause. Before deciding, you think. Before acting, you ask, am I present right now? That question alone can save you more money than any strategy. Because presence creates awareness, and awareness creates control. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. If you don't control your attention, someone else will control your spending. Simple, but real. Because every platform, every ad, every system is competing for one thing, your focus. And if they win your focus, they influence your decisions. Now here's the shift. You don't need to fight the world. You just need to protect your space. Small changes. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Create moments of silence. Separate thinking time from consumption time. Because when your mind is clear, your decisions improve. And when your decisions improve, your money stays aligned. Now this connects to something deeper you've already experienced. When your mind is scattered, everything feels harder. When your mind is focused, everything becomes simpler. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. And alignment is what creates progress without resistance. Now pause for a moment. Be honest. Where is your attention going every day? Is it intentional, or is it being pulled in every direction? Because wherever it goes, your life follows. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. Because once you protect your attention, you unlock something rare, clarity. And clarity changes how you see everything, your habits, your money, your future. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore something most people completely overlook. Something quiet, something internal, but incredibly powerful. Your relationship with enough. Because here's the truth. If you never feel like you have enough, you will never stop chasing more. And if you never stop chasing more, you will never feel at peace. But once you understand this next principle, you'll realize something life-changing. Wealth is not just about accumulation. It's about contentment. And that is where silent wealth becomes complete. Now we step into something deeper, quieter, and far more powerful than most people expect. Chapter 10. The Power of Enough. The wealth most people never reach. There is a silent trap that keeps people chasing money forever and never feeling rich. It's not lack of income. It's not bad decisions. It's not even discipline. It's the inability to define enough. Because if enough is unclear, more will never satisfy you. You earn more, you want more, you upgrade, you want another upgrade, you achieve and immediately raise the target. And suddenly, you are running a race with no finish line. Now here's what makes this dangerous. From the outside, it looks like progress, better lifestyle, better things, better experiences. But internally, there is no peace, because satisfaction keeps moving further away. Now here's where Japanese philosophy introduces something powerful, a quiet appreciation for sufficiency. Not settling, not limiting, but recognizing when something is already enough. And that awareness changes everything, because the moment you define enough, you create boundaries, and boundaries protect wealth. Now think about this. If you never decide what is enough for you, who decides? Society, trends, comparison, and those standards will always push you to spend more, because their goal is not your peace, it's your participation. Now imagine something different. You decide, this level of living is enough for me. Not permanently, but intentionally. And from that point, every extra resource becomes optional, not required. That shift removes pressure. You stop chasing, you start choosing. And when you start choosing, you regain control. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Wealth begins the moment you stop needing more to feel complete. Read that slowly, because this is not about money. This is about identity. Most people try to build wealth externally, while feeling incomplete internally. And that creates a contradiction, because no amount of money can fix a moving definition of enough. Now here's the deeper truth. Contentment does not kill ambition. It refines it. You still grow, you still improve, you still build, but you do it from stability and not from lack. That is a completely different energy. Now think about your own life. What does enough look like for you? Not what others expect, not what social media suggests, what you actually need to feel stable, calm, in control. Because once you define that, everything above it becomes leverage, not necessity. And that's where wealth accelerates, because you're no longer spending to catch up, you're building because you choose to. Now this connects to something powerful you've already felt. When you stop chasing validation, you start building something real, because your actions are no longer driven by others. They are driven by clarity, and clarity is rare. Now pause for a moment. Be honest with yourself. Are you building your life, or are you chasing someone else's version of it? Because that answer will determine your financial future. Now here's where we go next. Because defining enough creates peace. But there is still something missing. Protection. Because even when you build wealth, even when you gain clarity, life will test you. Unexpected events, unpredictable situations, moments where everything feels uncertain. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something essential, a layer of security that allows you to stay calm, even when everything around you is not. Because true wealth is not just about growth, it's about resilience. And once you build that, you don't just move forward, you become unshakable. Now we move into something that most people ignore until it's too late. To Chapter 11, Build Your Quiet Safety, the Strength of Being Prepared. There is a different kind of confidence, one that doesn't come from income, one that doesn't come from status, one that doesn't come from showing anything to anyone. It comes from knowing you're prepared, not perfectly, not for everything, but enough to stay standing when life shifts. Because here's the truth most people avoid. Life is unpredictable. Jobs change. Expenses appear. Situations evolve without warning. And in those moments, your financial habits are tested. Not when things are easy, when things are uncertain. Now here's what separates people. It's not how much they earn. It's how prepared they are. Because when you are unprepared, every problem becomes a crisis. But when you are prepared, problems become manageable. That difference is everything. Now in Japanese financial culture, there is a deep respect for preparedness. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because historically, life demanded resilience. And that mindset carried forward, quietly, consistently. Now think about your own situation. If something unexpected happened tomorrow, would you feel stable, or would you feel pressure immediately? That answer is not about judgment. It's about clarity. Because clarity allows you to act. Now here's the shift. Preparedness is not about having everything figured out. It's about creating a buffer, a space, a margin between you and chaos. And that margin is what gives you peace. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Wealth is not just what you build. It's what protects you when things break. Because things will break, plans will shift, situations will change, but when you have protection, you don't collapse, you adjust. Now let's make this practical. Preparedness doesn't require extreme action. It requires consistent action, setting aside small amounts, building gradually, creating a layer of security over time. That's it. No pressure, no perfection, just consistency. And over time, that consistency becomes strength. Now here's where it becomes powerful. When you feel secure, your decisions improve. You don't act out of panic. You don't make rushed choices. You don't compromise your future for short-term relief. Because you have space, and space creates clarity. Now think about that. How many bad financial decisions come from urgency, from pressure, from fear? Remove the pressure, and those decisions disappear. That's the power of preparedness. Now this connects to something deeper you've already felt. When your mind is calm, your actions are stronger. When your mind is pressured, your actions become reactive. So preparedness is not just financial, it's psychological. It protects your thinking, and protected thinking builds better outcomes. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what level of financial security would make you feel calm, not rich? Calm, because that's your starting point. Not an extreme goal, a realistic foundation. Now here's where we go next, because building security is powerful, but there is something even more important: how you behave when things are stable. Because most people build stability and then lose it, not through bad luck, through patterns, through habits that slowly undo everything they built. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something critical, a way to protect your progress. So you don't have to rebuild your life over and over again, because real wealth is not just built once, it is maintained quietly, consistently, intentionally. Now we move into the layer most people never secure. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comment section, and, most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 12. Protect the system. Why most people rebuild their lives over and over. There is a pattern that quietly destroys progress. It doesn't happen suddenly. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel dangerous at first, but over time, it resets everything. You build discipline, you create structure, you gain control, and then, slowly, it fades. Not because you forgot what to do, but because you stopped protecting what you built. This is where most people fail, not at the beginning, at maintenance. Because building something once feels exciting, maintaining it feels repetitive, and repetition is where discipline is tested. Now here's the truth. Your financial system is not permanent. It is fragile, not weak, but dependent. Dependent on your habits, your awareness, your consistency. And the moment those slip, the system weakens. Now think about this. How many times have you improved your situation only to fall back into old patterns? Not because you wanted to, but because you relaxed. You stopped paying attention. You stopped tracking. You stopped questioning. And slowly, the same habits returned. That's the cycle. Build, relax, slip, repeat. And most people stay in that loop for years. Now here's the shift. You don't just build a system, you protect it quietly, consistently, without needing to think about it too much, because protection is what makes progress permanent. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. What you don't protect, you will eventually lose. Simple, but true. Because everything in life requires maintenance, your health, your relationships, your mindset, and your money is no different. Now here's where Japanese discipline becomes powerful again. There is a respect for routine, not as something boring, but as something stabilizing. Because routine removes decision fatigue. You don't ask, should I track today? Should I be careful today? Should I stay consistent today? You just do it because it's part of who you are, and that identity protects your system automatically. Now think about your current habits. What protects your financial behavior? Is it strong enough to hold even when you're distracted? Even when you're tired? Even when life gets busy? Because if your system only works when you feel focused, it will break when you don't. Now, here's the shift. You simplify your system so it becomes easy to maintain, not impressive, not complex, sustainable, because sustainability is what creates long-term results. Now, this connects directly to something we touched on earlier. Complex systems fail under pressure. Simple systems survive. And survival is what builds real wealth. As highlighted in Disciplined Financial Habits, simplicity reduces confusion and makes consistency easier to maintain over time. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, if nothing changed in your life, would your current habits continue working, or would they slowly fall apart? Because that answer tells you everything. Now here's where it gets deeper, because protecting your system externally is one thing, but there is something internal that determines everything, your mindset during discomfort. Because sooner or later, you will feel resistance. You will feel the urge to break your own rules, to reward yourself, to just this once, your way out of discipline. And in the next chapter, we're going to step into that exact moment, the moment where most people lose control. And we're going to break it down so you can understand it and move through it. Because once you master that moment, you don't just build wealth, you keep it. Now we step into the moment that defines everything. Chapter 13, The Moment of Weakness, where wealth is won or lost. There is a moment, small, quiet, almost invisible, a moment where no one is watching, no pressure, no audience, no consequences, at least not immediately. And in that moment, you make a decision, spend or don't, break your system or follow it, give in or stay aligned. This is the moment most people underestimate because it feels insignificant. It's just this once. It doesn't matter. I deserve it. And in isolation, it doesn't matter. But repeated, it becomes everything. Now here's the truth. Wealth is not lost in one big mistake. It is lost in small, repeated exceptions. Moments where you tell yourself, just this once. And that phrase is one of the most expensive habits you can have, because just this once rarely happens once. It becomes twice, then occasionally, then normal, and suddenly your system no longer exists. Now here's what makes this powerful. The moment of weakness is not something to fear. It's something to understand, because once you understand it, you can control it. Now think about when this moment happens. Usually when you're tired, stressed, emotionally drained, not when you're at your best. And that's why relying on motivation fails, because motivation is weakest exactly when you need it most. So the solution is not to try harder. The solution is to prepare for the moment before it happens. Now let's break it down. In that moment, your brain is not thinking long-term. It's seeking relief, comfort, reward, escape. So if your system only relies on logic, you will lose because emotion overrides logic under pressure. But if your system includes awareness, you create a gap, a pause, and that pause is where control returns. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. The strongest version of you is built in the moments you almost gave in, because that's where identity is formed. Not when it's easy, when it's difficult. Now imagine this. You feel the urge to break your system. Instead of reacting, you pause. You don't fight it. You don't judge it. You observe it. Why do I want this right now? That question alone slows everything down. And in that slowing, you regain control. Now, here's something powerful. You don't have to win every moment. You just have to win more than you lose. Because consistency is built through majority, not perfection. And every time you choose alignment, even in a small way, you strengthen your identity. You become someone who follows through. Now this connects to something deeper. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's about refusing to negotiate with your own excuses. Because excuses will always exist. They will sound logical. They will feel justified, but they will lead you away from your future. And as you've seen before, negotiating with laziness, even once, strengthens it every time. That's why this moment matters. Because it trains your mind. Every decision is a vote for the person you are becoming. Now pause for a moment. Think about your last just this once. What triggered it? What justified it? What did it cost you? Not just financially, but mentally? Because awareness of that pattern is your leverage. Now here's where it gets powerful. Instead of trying to eliminate these moments, you expect them. You prepare for them. You decide in advance. When this happens, I will pause. That's it. Not perfection, just a pause. And that pause changes everything. Now here's where we go next, because controlling these moments is powerful. But there is something even deeper, something that determines how often those moments happen. Your identity. Because once your identity shifts, your behavior follows automatically. You don't fight yourself. You become someone different. And in the next chapter, we're going to unlock that shift from someone who tries to manage money to someone who naturally builds wealth. And once that shift happens, everything becomes easier. Now we step into the shift that changes everything. Chapter 14, Identity. Becoming the person who builds wealth. Naturally, most people try to change their financial life by changing their actions. Spend less, save more, be disciplined. But actions alone don't last, because actions are temporary. Identity is permanent. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because once your identity changes, your behavior follows automatically. You don't force yourself to act differently. You become someone who does. Now let me explain. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, every decision becomes a battle. Every improvement feels unnatural. Every mistake feels like proof that nothing has changed. But if you begin to see yourself differently, everything shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. You start thinking, I am someone who pays attention. I am someone who makes intentional decisions. I am someone who builds slowly but consistently. That identity creates alignment, because now your actions match who you believe you are, and when actions and identity align, consistency becomes effortless. Now here's the truth most people never realize. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity. If your identity is weak, your habits will break. If your identity is strong, your habits will hold. Now think about this. Why do some people stay disciplined even when no one is watching? It's not motivation, it's identity. They don't try to stay consistent. They are consistent because that's who they are. Now here's the shift you need to make. Stop focusing on what you do. Start focusing on who you are becoming, because every decision is a vote for that identity. Every time you track your spending, you are reinforcing awareness. Every time you pause before buying, you are reinforcing control. Every time you stay consistent, you are reinforcing discipline. And over time, those votes add up until one day, it's no longer effort. It's who you are. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. You don't build wealth by forcing habits. You build it by becoming the person those habits belong to. Read that again, because this is where everything becomes easier. Now here's something powerful. Identity doesn't change overnight. It builds through repetition, through small, consistent actions. The same principle you learned earlier, Kaizen, small improvements, compounding over time. But this time, it's not just your money changing, it's you. Now this connects to something deeper you've already felt. Real change doesn't come from outside, it comes from within, from the decision to take ownership and become responsible for your own direction. Because once you take ownership, you stop waiting, you start building. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, who are you becoming with your current habits? Not who you want to be, who your actions are shaping you into, because that answer is your trajectory. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need to change everything at once. You just need to shift one identity from I'm bad with money to I'm learning to be intentional with money. That's it. Small, but real, because identity shifts don't need to be extreme. They need to be believable. And once they are believable, they become sustainable. Now here's where we go next, because identity creates alignment. But there is still one final layer, a layer that determines how far this journey goes. Your long-term vision. Because without vision, consistency loses meaning. And in the next chapter, we're going to expand your perspective beyond daily habits, beyond monthly progress, into something bigger, something that gives direction to everything you've been building, because silent wealth is not just about stability, it's about legacy. And once you see that clearly, your entire relationship with money will change again. Now we step beyond the present. Chapter 15, Think in Generations, the Quiet Power of Long-Term Vision. Most people think about money in short time frames. This month, this year, maybe the next few years. Pay bills, save a little, handle what's in front of them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it creates a limitation, because when your vision is short, your decisions become reactive. You optimize for now instead of building for later. Now here's what makes this powerful. In Japanese culture, wealth is not just personal, it is generational. Not in a dramatic way, not in a loud way, quietly, carefully, over time. Because the goal is not just to live well today, but to create stability that extends beyond you. And that changes how you think. Because now, your decisions are no longer just about your current life. They are about continuity. Now, imagine this shift. Instead of asking, what do I want right now? You begin asking, what would my future self thank me for? That question alone changes your behavior, because your future self has clarity you don't. They are not emotional. They are not reactive. They see the long-term impact. And when you start thinking like them, you begin making different choices. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Short-term comfort builds a life you must escape. Long-term thinking builds a life you can stay in. Because that's the difference. Immediate pleasure or lasting stability. Now think about your current decisions. How many are driven by the present moment? How many are influenced by comfort, urgency, emotion? And how many are guided by long-term clarity? Because that ratio determines your future. Now here's where it gets deeper. Generational thinking is not about extreme wealth. It's about consistency over time. Small actions, repeated long enough, become something powerful. Because time magnifies everything. Good habits, bad habits, intentional decisions, unconscious ones. That's why patience is one of the most underrated financial skills, because patience allows compounding to work without interference, without interruption, without panic. Now this connects directly to something you've already learned, Kaizen, small improvements over time, but now applied at a higher level, not just daily habits, life direction. Because when you combine small improvements with long-term vision, you create unstoppable momentum. Now pause for a moment. Think about your life 10 years from now, not in detail, in feeling. Do you want stability, freedom, peace? Because those outcomes are built today, not later. Now here's the shift. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need direction, a simple one. I am building something that lasts. That's it. Because that mindset guides your decisions automatically. Now this connects to something deeper you've already felt. When you stop living reactively and start living intentionally, everything becomes clearer. Your time, your energy, your money, and clarity creates progress. Now here's where we go next, because thinking long-term is powerful. But there is something that can break even the strongest vision. Comparison. Because no matter how clear your path is, if you constantly look at others, you lose focus. And in the next chapter, we're going to expose one of the most dangerous habits in modern financial life. A habit that silently drains money, destroys clarity, and keeps people stuck in cycles they don't even realize they're in. Because once you understand this, you'll realize something powerful. Your biggest competition is not other people. It's distraction disguised as comparison. Now we confront one of the most silent and most dangerous traps of all. Chapter 16, The Comparison Trap. How looking at others makes you lose yourself. There is a habit so common, so normalized, that most people don't even question it. They scroll, they watch, they compare, and slowly they start adjusting their life based on someone else's highlight. Now, here's the problem. Comparison doesn't just affect how you feel. It affects how you spend. Because the moment you measure your life against others, you begin to chase what they have, not what you need, not what aligns with your goals, but what they show. And what they show is rarely the full picture. Now think about this. You see someone traveling, buying something expensive, living a certain lifestyle, and immediately a thought appears. I should be doing that too. That one thought can cost you months, even years, of financial progress. Because now your decisions are no longer yours. They are influenced, and influence is expensive. Now here's what makes this even more dangerous. Comparison creates urgency. You feel behind, you feel late, you feel like you need to catch up. And urgency leads to rushed decisions, spending without thinking, upgrading without purpose, chasing without clarity. That's how wealth disappears, not through logic, through emotion. Now here's the truth most people never accept. You are not competing with anyone because their path is not your path. Their timeline is not your timeline. Their reality is not your reality. And once you truly understand that, something powerful happens. You stop chasing. You start focusing. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. The moment you compare your life to someone else's, you abandon your own strategy, because strategy requires focus, and focus cannot exist when your attention is scattered across other people's lives. Now imagine something different. You stay in your lane, quietly. You observe, but you don't absorb. You see, but you don't react, because your direction is clear, and clarity removes the need to compare. Now this connects to something deeper you've already felt. When you stop seeking validation, you start building something real, because your actions are no longer influenced by others. They are aligned with your own goals. Now pause for a moment. Be honest. How often do your financial decisions come from comparison? Not intentionally, subtly. Because this is not always obvious. It's quiet. It shows up as, I deserve this too. Everyone else is doing it. I don't want to feel left out. And those thoughts are expensive. Now here's the shift. Instead of comparing your life to others, compare your current self to your past self. That's it. Are you more aware, more intentional, more in control? If the answer is yes, you're already winning. Because progress is personal, not relative. Now here's where we go next. Because removing comparison creates clarity. But there is something even deeper, something that determines how fast your progress accelerates. Your ability to ask. Because most people stay stuck, not because they don't have opportunities, but because they don't pursue them. And in the next chapter, we're going to unlock a skill that quietly multiplies your growth, a skill that most people avoid because of fear, hesitation, or doubt. But once you understand it, you'll realize something powerful. You don't get what you hope for. You get what you position yourself for. And that changes everything. Now we unlock something most people underestimate. But chapter 17, the quiet skill of asking, how opportunity expands your wealth. There is a reason some people grow faster, not because they are smarter, not because they are luckier, not because they have more resources, but because they do something most people avoid. They ask, not loudly, not desperately, clearly, confidently, and consistently. Now here's the truth most people never accept. Opportunities are rarely handed to you. They are positioned, and positioning requires action. Because waiting is the slowest way to build anything. Now think about this. How many times have you stayed silent when you could have asked for more clarity, more opportunity, more value, not because you didn't want it, but because you hesitated, you overthought, you doubted yourself, you assumed the answer would be no, and in that silence, nothing changed. Now here's what makes this powerful. When you don't ask, you stay in the same position, same income, same opportunities, same limitations. Not because that's all that exists, but because that's all you accessed. Now imagine something different. You start asking, not recklessly, intentionally. You ask for better terms. You ask for opportunities. You ask for clarity before making decisions. And suddenly, your world expands because now you are not waiting for change. You are creating access to it. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. Silence keeps you where you are. Asking moves you forward. Simple, but powerful. Because growth requires movement, and movement requires initiative. Now here's where most people struggle. They associate asking with rejection. They think, what if they say no? What if it's awkward? What if I look inexperienced? But here's the shift. Rejection is not loss. It's information. It tells you where you stand, what is possible, what needs adjustment. And without that information, you stay stuck in assumptions. Now think about your financial life. Where are you staying silent? Is it your income, your opportunities, your decisions? Because every area where you hesitate to ask becomes a limit. Now this connects to something deeper you've already felt. Your life expands to the level you believe you deserve. And if you don't believe you deserve more, you won't ask for more. That's why this is not just a skill, it's a mindset. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, where could you ask that you haven't? Not aggressively, just clearly. Because clarity creates movement. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need to ask for everything, you just need to ask more than you did before. Small steps, consistent steps, and over time, those steps create access. Now here's the shift. You are not asking for permission, you are asking for possibility. And that difference changes your entire approach. Now here's where we go next. Because asking creates opportunity, but there is something that determines how well you use it. Your ability to stay calm under pressure, because opportunity often comes with uncertainty. And in the next chapter, we're going to step into something critical. How to maintain clarity when things don't go as planned. Because wealth is not built in perfect conditions. It's built in controlled responses. And once you master that, nothing can shake your direction. Now we step into the moment where everything gets tested. Or Chapter 18, Calm Under Pressure, the skill that protects everything. It's easy to stay disciplined when everything is going well, when income is stable, when life feels predictable, when your system is working smoothly. But real strength is revealed when things don't go as planned, when something unexpected happens, when pressure rises, when uncertainty enters your life. That's when most people lose control, not because they don't know what to do, but because they lose clarity. And when clarity disappears, emotion takes over. Now think about this. A sudden expense appears. A financial setback happens. A situation shifts without warning. What is your first reaction? Panic, stress, urgency? Because that first reaction determines your next decision. And your next decision determines your direction. Now here's what makes this powerful. In Japanese philosophy, calmness is not passive. It is trained. Because staying calm is not about avoiding pressure. It's about controlling your response to it. And that skill protects everything you've built. Now imagine two people. Both face the same problem. One reacts immediately. They rush. They make emotional decisions. They try to fix everything at once. The other pauses. They breathe. They assess. They move with intention. Same situation. Completely different outcomes. Why? because one lost control and the other kept it. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. You don't lose wealth in difficult moments. You lose it in emotional reactions. Because the problem itself is rarely the issue. The response is. Now here's the shift. You don't try to eliminate pressure. You prepare for it. You expect it. You train yourself to pause before reacting, because that pause is where clarity returns. Now let's make this practical. When something unexpected happens, you don't act immediately. You ask yourself, what is actually happening? What are my options? What is the calmest next step? Not the fastest, the calmest. Because calm decisions are better decisions. Now this connects to something deeper you've already learned. Your mind under pressure will default to its training, not its intention. That's why building awareness, consistency, and discipline matters so much. Because when things get difficult, you don't rise to the moment, you fall back to your system. And if your system is strong, you stay stable. Now pause for a moment. Think about a time you made a rushed financial decision. What caused it? Pressure, fear, urgency? And what would have changed if you had paused? Because that awareness is your leverage. Now here's where it gets powerful. Calmness is not something you wait for. It's something you practice in small moments, daily. When you feel rushed, you slow down. When you feel pressure, you breathe. When you feel urgency, you pause, and over time, that becomes your default. Now this connects to something deeper you've already felt. A trained mind does not panic. It responds, and that ability separates those who stay stable from those who collapse under pressure. Now here's the shift. You are not trying to control life. You are learning to control yourself within it, and that is real power. Now here's where we go next, because staying calm protects your decisions. But there is something even more important, what you do after the moment passes, because every experience, every mistake, every challenge contains something valuable, a lesson. And in the next chapter, we're going to unlock how to use those lessons to accelerate your growth. Because the people who build silent wealth are not the ones who avoid mistakes. They are the ones who learn from them faster than everyone else. Now we turn every setback into an advantage. Chapter 19. Learn faster than you fail. The wealth of reflection. Most people make mistakes. That's normal. What's not normal is how they respond to them. Some ignore them, some repeat them, some feel regret, but never change. And that's where progress stops. Not because of the mistake, but because of the lack of reflection. Now here's the truth. Mistakes are not expensive. Unlearned mistakes are. Because every mistake carries information. A signal, a pattern, a lesson. And if you extract that lesson, the mistake becomes an investment. But if you ignore it, it becomes a cycle. Now think about this. How many financial mistakes have you made that you never fully analyzed? Impulse purchases, poor decisions, moments of weakness. You moved on quickly, but did you understand them? Because understanding is what creates growth. Now here's what makes this powerful. In Japanese culture, there is a concept of continuous reflection, not judgment, not guilt, observation, looking back to move forward, and that shift changes everything because now you're not afraid of mistakes, you use them. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. A mistake only costs you once. If you learn from it, it costs you forever. If you don't, simple but powerful, because repetition is what creates loss. Now here's the shift. Every time something doesn't go as planned, you pause, not to blame yourself, but to ask, what happened? Why did it happen? What will I do differently next time? That's it. 3 simple questions, but they create clarity, and clarity prevents repetition. Now imagine this. Instead of feeling frustrated after a bad decision, you analyze it. You understand the trigger, the emotion, the pattern, and next time, you recognize it before it happens. That's growth. Now here's something deeper. Most people try to avoid mistakes completely, but that's not realistic. Growth requires movement, and movement includes errors. So the goal is not perfection, it's adaptation, learning faster than you repeat. Now this connects directly to something you've already felt. Your progress depends on your ability to stay aware, even after things go wrong, because awareness is what turns experience into improvement. Now pause for a moment. Think about your last financial mistake, not emotionally, objectively. What triggered it? What pattern led to it? What will you change? Because those answers are your advantage. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need to avoid every mistake. You just need to reduce repetition. Because once a mistake becomes a lesson, it stops being a loss and starts being leverage. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Start asking, what is this teaching me? That question alone changes your entire mindset. Now this connects to something deeper. People who grow quickly are not the ones who never fail. They are the ones who adjust immediately. And that adjustment creates momentum. Now here's where we go next. Because learning from mistakes accelerates your growth. But there is something even more powerful. Teaching yourself discipline, even when no one is watching. Because at the end of the day, all of this comes down to one thing: self-leadership. And in the next chapter, we're going to step into that final layer, the ability to guide yourself without needing external pressure. Because once you master that, you don't just build wealth, you control your entire direction. Now we arrive at the layer that holds everything together. Chapter 20, Self-Leadership, the Final Discipline. At some point, there is no system left to rely on, no external pressure, no reminders, no structure forcing you to stay on track, just you. And in that moment, everything you've built is tested, because self-leadership is not about knowing what to do. It's about doing it without being told. Now, here's the truth most people never accept. You can have the best strategy, the best tools, the best knowledge, and still fail if you cannot lead yourself. Because at the end of the day, no one is managing your decisions. No one is controlling your habits. No one is responsible except you. Now, this is not pressure. This is power. Because once you take ownership, you remove dependency. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop needing validation. You stop relying on external structure, and you start moving on your own terms. Now think about this. How many times have you waited for the right moment, the right mood, the right energy, the right conditions? And how many times did that moment never come? Because waiting is the slowest form of delay. Now here's the shift. You don't wait to feel ready. You act, and readiness follows. That's self-leadership. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. The moment you stop waiting is the moment your life starts moving. Because movement creates clarity, not the other way around. Now here's where most people struggle. They rely on motivation. They think, I'll do it when I feel like it. I'll start when I'm ready. I'll stay consistent when I'm inspired. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes, and if your life depends on it, your progress will always be unstable. That's why self-leadership replaces motivation with commitment, a quiet decision. I will do this regardless of how I feel, not aggressively, not emotionally, calmly, consistently. Now, here's something powerful. Self-leadership is built in small moments, not big ones. When you choose to track, even when it's boring. When you choose to pause, even when it's tempting. When you choose to stay consistent, even when no one is watching. Those moments build strength. Now, this connects directly to something you've already felt. Real growth happens when you focus on yourself, without distractions, without excuses, without waiting, because that focus creates direction. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, do you trust yourself to follow through? Not sometimes, consistently, because that trust is everything, and it's built through action, not intention. Now, here's the shift. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to become reliable to yourself. Because once you trust your own decisions, everything becomes easier. You stop second guessing. You stop hesitating. You stop delaying, and you start moving. Now, here's where it gets powerful. Self-leadership creates independence, not just financially, mentally. Because now, you are not controlled by emotion. You are not controlled by environment. You are not controlled by others. You are directed from within. Now, here's where we go next. Because self-leadership brings control. But there is one final realization that ties everything together. A realization that most people never reach. Not because it's complicated, but because it's quiet. And in the next chapter, we bring everything full circle. From awareness to identity to action into one clear understanding. What silent wealth truly is and why it has nothing to do with what people see and everything to do with how you live. Now we bring everything together. Chapter 21. Silent Wealth, the life no one sees, but everyone feels. At the beginning of this journey, you thought this was about money, saving more, spending less, building something stable. And yes, it is. But now you can see something deeper. This was never just about money. It was about control. Control over your habits. Control over your attention. Control over your identity. Because money is just a reflection of how you think, how you decide, how you live. And when those things are aligned, wealth becomes a byproduct, not a struggle. Now, here's the truth most people never realize. Silent wealth is not something you show. It's something you feel. It's waking up without financial anxiety. It's making decisions without pressure. It's knowing you're moving forward, even when no one sees it. That is real power, not the kind that gets attention, the kind that creates peace. Now think about everything you've learned. You became aware of your patterns. You slowed down your decisions. You improved step by step. You removed unnecessary noise. You protected your attention. You defined what enough means. You built security. You stayed consistent. You learned from mistakes. You took ownership. Each step, small, but together, they created something powerful. A system, not just for money, for life. Now let me give you a line to anchor everything. Silent wealth is not built by what you earn, but by who you become. Because who you become determines everything else. Now here's something important. You don't need to announce this journey. You don't need to prove it. You don't need validation because the strongest transformations happen quietly. And one day, the results speak, not loudly, but clearly. Now pause for a moment. Look at yourself honestly, not where you started, where you are now. More aware, more intentional, more in control? If the answer is yes, you've already begun. Now here's where we go next. Because understanding silent wealth is one thing, living it is another. And in the next chapter, we're going to move from understanding into daily execution. Simple actions, repeatable habits, a rhythm you can follow without overthinking, because knowledge without action changes nothing, but action changes everything. And now you're ready for it. Now we turn understanding into action. Chapter 22, The Daily System, How to Live Silent Wealth. Every day, understanding changes your thinking, but action changes your life. Because no matter how clear everything feels right now, if you don't translate it into daily behavior, nothing will last. And this is where most people fail, not because they lack knowledge, but because they lack a system. Now here's the truth. You don't need a complicated routine. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a simple system that you can repeat daily, weekly, monthly, without resistance, because repetition is what creates results. Now, imagine this. Instead of guessing what to do with your money, you follow a rhythm, a quiet structure, one that removes confusion and replaces it with clarity. Now let's break it down simply. Every day you stay aware, not obsessively, just conscious. You notice your decisions. You pause before spending. You stay present. That's it. No pressure. Just awareness. Now every week, you reflect. You take a few minutes to look back. What did you spend? What patterns showed up? What can you improve? Not judgment. Observation. Because observation creates improvement. Now every month, you adjust. You don't react emotionally. You don't overcorrect. You refine small changes, better alignment, clearer direction. That's the system. Simple, repeatable, sustainable. Now, let me give you a line to anchor this. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a repeatable one. Because perfection creates pressure. Repetition creates progress. Now here's something powerful. This system doesn't rely on motivation. It relies on structure. And structure carries you forward, even when you don't feel like it. Now think about your life. What happens when you don't have structure? You drift, you react, you delay, you lose clarity. But when you have structure, you move with intention, even in small ways. Now this connects directly to something you've already felt. One focused hour, repeated daily, can change everything, because consistency compounds. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what would your life look like if you followed this system for the next 6 months? Not perfectly, just consistently. Because that's all it takes. Not intensity, consistency. Now, here's the shift. You are not trying to change your entire life overnight. You are building a rhythm, a quiet pattern that moves you forward every single day. Now, here's where we go next. Because building a system is powerful. But there is one final layer that determines whether you stay on this path. Your commitment to yourself. Because systems can be built, habits can be learned, but commitment is chosen. And in the next chapter, we're going to lock everything in. A decision, a line in the sand, a moment where you stop drifting and start leading your life with intention, because everything you've learned means nothing until you decide it matters. Now this is the moment that defines everything. Chapter 23, the decision where everything changes. There comes a point where learning is no longer enough, where understanding is no longer enough, where even small actions are no longer enough. Because at some point, you must decide, not casually, not temporarily, not when it's convenient, but clearly, fully, without negotiation. Because until that decision is made, everything remains optional. And what is optional will eventually be ignored. Now think about your own life. How many times have you said, I should do better? I need to change. I'll start soon. And yet, nothing truly shifted. Not because you didn't care, but because you didn't decide. You considered. You thought about it. You felt motivated for a moment, but you never crossed the line. Now here's the truth. Change does not happen when you feel ready. It happens when you become committed. And commitment is not emotional, it's structural. It's a line you draw, a point where you say, this is who I am now. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Now, let me give you a line to anchor this. Your life changes the moment your standards become non-negotiable, because standards create behavior, not motivation, not feelings. Standards. Now imagine this. Instead of asking yourself, do I feel like doing this today? You ask, is this aligned with who I am now? That question removes emotion. It replaces it with identity. And identity doesn't negotiate. Now here's the shift. You are no longer someone trying to improve your finances. You are someone who lives intentionally. That's the decision. And once that decision is made, everything becomes simpler. Not easier, simpler. Because now, there is no internal debate, no constant back and forth, no endless hesitation. There is alignment. Now this connects directly to something deeper you've already felt. The moment you take full ownership is the moment everything starts moving forward. Because ownership removes excuses. It replaces them with responsibility. And responsibility creates action. Now pause for a moment. Be honest with yourself. Have you truly decided, or are you still considering? Because there is a difference. One creates movement, the other creates delay. Now here's what this decision looks like. It's quiet, no announcement, no dramatic change, no need for anyone else to know. Just a clear internal shift. I will no longer ignore what I know. That's it. Because once you stop ignoring what you know, your behavior changes automatically. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need to be perfect after this. You just need to stay aligned. Because mistakes will still happen. Discomfort will still appear. But your direction will not change. Now here's the shift. You are no longer reacting to life. You are leading it quietly, consistently, intentionally. Now here's where we go next. Because making the decision is powerful. But there is one final layer that completes everything. Integration. Because this is not something you do once. This is something you live daily. And in the final chapter, we bring everything together into one clear path forward. A way to carry this with you, not just today, but for the rest of your life. Because silent wealth is not a phase, it's a way of living. Now we arrive at the final integration. Chapter 24, Integration, Living the Way of Silent Wealth. This is where everything becomes real. Not as an idea, not as motivation, not as something you try to do, but as something you live. Because the truth is, you don't need more information. You already have everything you need. awareness, control, consistency, clarity. The question is no longer, what should I do? The question is, how do I live this every day? And the answer is simple. You don't force it, you integrate it quietly, naturally, without pressure. Now imagine this. You wake up and you are aware, not overthinking, not stressed, just present. You move through your day, and your decisions reflect that awareness. You pause before spending. You think before reacting. You stay aligned with your standards, not perfectly, but consistently. That is integration. Now here's what makes this powerful. When something becomes part of your life, it no longer feels like effort. It becomes normal. And when it becomes normal, it becomes permanent. Now let me give you a line to anchor this. The goal is not to try harder, it's to live differently. Because trying harder creates resistance. Living differently creates flow. Now think about everything you've built through this journey. You don't spend without thinking anymore. You don't react without awareness. You don't chase without clarity. That is not temporary. That is transformation. Now here's something important. You will still face challenges, moments of weakness, moments of distraction, moments where old patterns try to return. That's normal. But here's the difference now. You notice. And when you notice, you adjust. Quickly, without drama, without guilt, because you understand the system. And understanding creates control. Now this connects directly to something deeper. Consistency is not about never falling off. It's about returning faster every time, because the faster you return, the less damage is done. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what part of this system already feels natural to you? Because that's where your strength is. And what part still feels challenging? Because that's where your growth is. Now here's the shift. You don't need to fix everything. You just need to continue. That's it. Because continuation is what creates mastery. Now here's where we go next. The final step. Not a new concept, not a new system, but a realization, a truth that ties everything together. Because silent wealth is not something you reach. It's something you become. And in the final chapter, we close this journey with one clear understanding, one line that you will carry with you long after this ends. And now we close the circle. But chapter 25, The Quiet Truth. What wealth really is. At the beginning of this journey, you were looking for answers. How to save more, how to spend less, how to build something stable. And along the way, you discovered something deeper. This was never just about money. It was about who you become when no one is watching. Because money is just the surface. Underneath it is awareness, discipline, clarity, control. And those things shape everything else. Now here's the final truth. Wealth is not what you have. It's what you can keep. It's what you can control. It's what you can sustain without stress. Because anyone can earn, many can spend, but very few can build quietly and hold it long enough for it to grow. That is silent wealth. Now let me give you the final line, the one that ties everything together. True wealth is the ability to live calmly while your future builds itself. Read that again, because that is the destination. Not pressure, not chasing, not proving, calm, steady, intentional. Now think about your life, not what you show others, what you feel inside. Do you feel in control? Do you feel clear? Do you feel stable? Because that feeling is the real measure of wealth. Now, here's something important. This journey doesn't end here. It continues. Every decision you make, every habit you repeat, every moment you choose awareness over autopilot. That's where it lives, not in big changes, in small, consistent ones. Now let's bring it all together. You learn to see your money clearly. You learn to slow down your decisions. You learn to improve step by step. You learn to remove noise and distraction. You learned to define enough. You learned to protect your progress. You learned to stay calm under pressure. You learned to lead yourself. And now, you don't just understand wealth. You embody it quietly. Now take a moment. This is your moment. Not to think, to decide. Who are you going to be from this point forward? Because everything you've heard means nothing until you live it. Now, if this journey resonated with you, make it real. Hit like, not for the video, but as a contract with yourself, a signal that you are choosing awareness over autopilot. Drop a comment, not for others, but for clarity. What is one habit you are committing to starting today? And if you know someone who is stuck in the same cycle you were in, share this with them, because sometimes one idea changes everything. And finally, if you want to stay consistent, if you want to keep building this version of yourself, subscribe, not for content, for accountability. Because this is not about watching, it's about becoming. Now take a breath and remember this. You don't need luck. You don't need stress. You don't need noise. You just need awareness, consistency, and the courage to build your life quietly. Because in the end, the strongest wealth is the one no one sees, but you feel every single day.